Hey guys, I was at the State House this morning, and I wanted to share some thoughts I had with you about the about lobbying and political-driven agendas that seem to compromise the freedom and liberty of Joe the taxpayer. So I was hoping that I might be able to share those with you. You might get a kick out of it. Hopefully, it's not long, tedious, and boring and all that. But as you know, it's good for my therapy anyway. So, regardless. Uh, As I think back over the years, I've seen the driving support for particular political agenda items. For example, this year, the state's support for an application for a constitutional convention. I'm reminded of a variety of out of state influence, including packets and things that were or are being delivered to our legislators, or visits from out of state mayors or congressmen or speakers allegedly experts in the field. As this applies to many issues, I would specifically like to end this thing with how it applies to the Constitutional Convention and the inability to get the opposing perspective to be seen and heard by those driving for support of a convention. With the expedience during the legislative sessions, why does it seem that no one is asking who is the driving force behind legislation and what the supporters have to gain armed with their heavy financing? Do those that lack the funds lose out when the opposition could just save us all from what could be catastrophic consequences? Should lobbyists be defined as those with corporate interests that benefit only themselves, or should this definition be broadened and apply to those that can ask the tough constitutional questions to help maintain the state's integrity that will benefit us all the same way? I have a hard time imagining how lobbying, as it is statutorily defined now, refers to the mere act of any verbal communication, but does not extend to the ability to send information to them. Is this not freedom of speech and the press? Weren't they to be unrestricted? It would appear that the statute by government not only restricts the citizen's protected right of freedom of speech, but actually cleverly controls any dissenting opposition, unless, of course, you've paid the state for the privilege of utilizing that right. What it also presumes is that only those that have the time can afford to speak are the ones that are privileged enough to do so. This granted privilege also seems to afford the ability for the state to look into your personal finances, which would seem to violate the Fourth Amendment, in being secure in your personal effects, as well as the presumption of guilt rather than the opposite. My point being is that this is one example of the multitude where government created to do one thing always seems to expand its powers to do much more than it was originally created to do. What if the state is controlled by those with the money? What if the corporations desire to fulfill their agenda and trumps what is good for their Joe the taxpayer? Shall not Joe the taxpayer, at an obvious disadvantage, as the taxpayer funding the existence of government, have full blanket access to any and all legislators to stand in full representation without being controlled, as the lobbyists have full reign to them all, as they are solely employed to occupy the State House during the entire legislative session? If they have a full-time occupation during the entire session, who is safeguarding the liberties of the people while they work multiple jobs to stay above water, while the states raise their taxes to fund special interest and misappropriate funds? Shall we be punished merely for opening our mouth or befriending any legislator? If so, why all of a sudden is that punishment forgiven if the fee is paid for government authorization to do what one is perfectly able to do without that fee? Weren't fees to define infractions as a penalty for wrongdoing? Does government possess the lawful power to restrict the freedom of speech when every vote on a particular topic is crucial, in many cases to pass or fail, and does not the outcome of that vote hinge on the support or opposition of that piece of legislation? Was not the purpose of lobbyists originally to help inform the legislators on a full spectrum of knowledge on an issue? If this is true, why then is it a common understanding to note that lobbyists only speak to the legislators on one side of an issue to fulfill the needs of the organization or the corporations without what might be harmful to the citizenry? Who delegated the authority solely to the lobbyists in the first place to be the controlling influence without anyone representing the people? Who is the group that holds government accountable to the Constitution, safeguarding our liberties when Joe, taxpayer, is denied access to those that allegedly serve him? Whose duty was it to protect the rights of the citizens? Was it lobbyists that have easier access to any legislator and are paid to be there full time while the people whom are you to safeguard their liberties work while the corporate controlling hand sways the legislator to opt in favor of corporate interests? Do the corporations have any personal vested interest in protecting the rights of the people, or is it merely to gain a profit or to stay employed? Are there heavy bonuses if the legislators vote a certain way? Do constitutional liberty-minded people have lobbyists? Should they be necessary, knowing that prior to the elected office, they all swore an oath to the Constitution to safeguard those liberties? Wouldn't that oath indicate a basic knowledge of the Constitution and the limitations placed upon them, acting in accordance with that oath? If one takes an oath to these things, could it be said that they either lack the knowledge of the oath they swore or never intended on upholding it in the first place, which should carry with it punishments far greater than one's citizenry desiring to speak with any legislator, which, by the way, happen to be fellow Idahoans, friends, and family? Are citizens also forbidden in communicating with legislators outside the State House as well as inside? If so, are the citizens banned only during the session? And if so, what if they're family? Can you see by asking a few of these questions that these legal restrictions are absolutely absurd and give the appearance as a way for government to have control over our freedom of speech, which was a right, not a privilege to be paid for? I have come too far over the years to believe that the state would ever consider denying the right to lobbyists with special privileges. So what I'm merely suggesting is an acknowledgement or re-empowerment of a basic right that has been protected by government in the first place, not to beg or ask permission for a basic right protected by the Constitution, but to clarify the citizens should not be denied any access to any legislators, especially due to the difficulty most citizens have in even attending the State House part-time, much less full-time or even an hour, as it is prohibitive due to the job, to having to leave the job and lose that additional revenue that's generated while they're at the State House. Related to Article 5 specifically, it is known that many of the supporters of the convention have led meetings with the legislatures across the country, both in committee and in private meetings. Many of their writings have videos, and these have been transmitted to the legislators as well. In order to offer a viable, important alternative, to be truly informed on both sides of the issue, consideration even sponsoring a luncheon or a meeting with Arthur Thompson, the CEO for the John Birch Society, would be helpful to learn the opposing side of Article 5 and what the other supporting groups are not clearly stating, since this organization is one of only less than a handful that oppose the issue, and what I believe to be good for good reason. Will you consider meeting on Wednesday before this event, March 18th, perhaps between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m.? Art will be giving presentations on the trade merger, the TPP and the TIP, Wednesday night, March 18th at 7 p.m. at the Boise Convention Center. He'll also be speaking on Thursday, March 19th at 7 o'clock at the King's Little Theater next to the Burley High School, and on Friday in Sandy, Utah. Many legislators I speak with identify and resonate with the fact that what I'm saying, that we're faced with some tough times, even referred to as passing the point of no return, and feel they are out of options or solutions. If this is true, why have so few even stated this crisis in a public forum that may even show that the media has its inability to resort to factual seriousness in the news? It is imperative that we address the wrongdoing in government at all levels, not to embarrass those in office as negligent, but to be able to commend those that are standing up in honor, to realize that they care enough to be able to make something right before they no longer can. Is it not better than to attempt to fix a sinking ship before it sinks, rather than afterwards? If the sinking ship was our means of staying alive, Is not this the same as our government, as it may not understand the death of America's independence? Please restore the freedom of speech and of the press, protected under the Constitution, and look into both sides of any issue before jumping in support of it. Look at the facts. I say this because we are friends, we're neighbors, family, co-workers, and cohabitors on one of the finest states in the Union. Let's be an example to the rest of the nation that we can make things right. I would love the ability to be a resource for any of you, should you consider an alternate perspective. I'm not peddling a selfish corporate agenda that benefits a few as lobbyists. I'm attempting to save a nation that will preserve freedom for all of us, while exercising all of my unalienable God-given rights, protected by my government and my constitutional republic. And so those are some of the thoughts I have on the lobbying, the political agenda, and the Constitutional Convention, and whatever else I can throw in there, showing that I too can actually focus on one topic. Anyway, I love you guys, and I just hope that you can share this, find some value in this video, share it, and let's save this country, shall we? Love you guys. Bye.